My mom died, and my stepfather stole the inheritance. Right after her funeral, I discovered he was scheming to take my grandparents' inheritance, but instead of staying silent, I took him to court and left him with nothing. Welcome to Storytime Reddit, everyone. I'm an 18-year-old guy now, but everything I'm about to tell you started when I was 17, the year my entire life flipped upside down. If you think 17 is just about school, first crushes, or stressing over college entrance exams, then my story will feel like a harsh slap of reality, a wake-up call to the romanticized teenage dream. Because at 17, I lost my mom, lost my grandparents, the only people who ever truly loved me, and got dragged into a survival war against a man I never once considered family, my stepfather. My biological dad passed away when I was just 7. I was too young to understand grief properly, but I have faint memories of him, a quiet man who would gently pat my head and sing old songs to put me to sleep. Everything changed not long after when my mom remarried a man named Kane, a complete stranger with a salesman's smile and cold, calculating eyes that gave me chills from the very first moment we met. Mom told me, "You need to accept the new family. Grow up because I deserve to be happy too." But something inside me never trusted him, and I've learned to never ignore that gut feeling. Kane always acted charming and polite in front of my mom, but the second her back was turned, his eyes would shift cold, judgmental, like I was an obstacle in his perfect little life. To make things worse, he had a daughter named Mai who was the same age as me. From day one, she treated me like I was invading her kingdom. I never understood why. Maybe she thought I was stealing attention, or maybe she was just spoiled rotten and couldn't function in a world where someone didn't bend to her will. Either way, from the moment we moved into their house, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't welcome. I wasn't family. I was the outsider. What made it unbearable was that my mom, desperate to keep the peace, always told me to suck it up. When I complained that Mai was constantly teasing and bullying me, my mom would say, "You're the older brother. Set an example. Be the bigger person." I was only 4 months older than Mie, but somehow that made me responsible for every compromise, transferring to her school, sharing rides, adjusting to a house that never felt like mine. Eventually, I grew distant from my mom. She was too busy keeping Kane and Mai happy, too busy building a picture-perfect new family to notice her own son fading into the background. The only place I ever felt safe anymore was at my grandparents' house, my dad's parents. They lived just outside the city, in an old villa with a big garden, a pond, and a peace I couldn't find anywhere else. Every weekend, I'd find a way to visit them. There, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the problem child. I was their grandson, the last living connection to the son they had lost too soon. My grandparents weren't like other adults. They didn't lecture or scold me. They listened. My grandpa liked to sit in his old rocking chair and tell stories from the old days while puffing on his pipe. My grandma always had a warm meal or tea ready, as if she just knew I needed comfort. With them, I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. I didn't have to earn my place. I just belonged. Because my dad was their only child, I was their everything. "You are the last piece of our son," Grandma once told me. And our reason to keep going. I never forgot the way her eyes looked when she said that. But peace never lasts forever. One day, Mai started demanding to tag along to my grandparents' place. Why? Because she found out they had a pool. That's it. She didn't care about them. She didn't care about me. She wanted a poolside Instagram background, and Mom, of course, thought it was a great opportunity for us to bond. "Be the bigger person," she said. Again. And I just stood there thinking, when did I become the only one who has to sacrifice for this so-called family? When did my emotions become disposable just so my mom could live her fantasy of a perfect home? I didn't know the answer. All I knew was that at 17, I felt more alone inside that house than I ever thought possible. And that was just the beginning. If there's one place in this world where I ever felt like I could truly be myself, it was my grandparents' house. It was this old villa nestled in a garden full of towering trees, where every corner held memories of a simpler, more innocent version of me. After long days at school, or after yet another argument in my family's chaos, I would escape there like a bird, finding its way back to the nest after a storm. My grandparents weren't like anyone else. They didn't lecture me, didn't force lessons down my throat. They just understood in that quiet, unspoken way. My grandpa liked to sit in his old rocking chair, puffing on his pipe while sharing stories from the old days. My grandma baked pastries and always had hot tea ready, waiting for me like she just knew when I needed comfort. In that house, I didn't have to pretend to be the model big brother. I didn't have to force bonds with people who didn't care. I could just be just a grandson. The only one left after my dad passed away. My dad had been an only child, so to them, I was everything. Once, my grandma told me, "You are the last drop of your father's blood, our reason to keep going." I'll never forget the warmth in her eyes when she said that. Every time I visited, she'd cook my favorite fish soup, and my grandpa would take me around the garden, teaching me how to prune trees and grow vegetables by season. Those were some of the few moments in my life where I felt peace. Until Martha came into the picture. At first, she didn't care about my weekend visits to my grandparents. She never asked about them. But one day, she overheard my mom talking about how the house had a big garden, a pool, and flower beds that looked like a resort. Suddenly, her eyes lit up like she'd struck gold. The very next weekend, my mom forced me to bring her along. "Let her connect with your dad's side of the family," she said. Connect? With my family? She didn't even know my father's name. She had zero interest in our family's history or the people in it. But my mom didn't care. "You're the big brother," she reminded me again. "This is your chance to bond." I told her no. I was blunt. I said I didn't want Martha there, that it was the only place I had to myself. She brushed me off, repeating her favorite line, "Grow up." From that point on, every weekend, Martha would drag her suitcase behind me like a clingy shadow, annoying, unnecessary, and completely disruptive. She didn't care about my grandparents. The only thing she saw was the pool and a pretty backdrop for her Instagram. She was rude to my grandma, snapped at my grandpa when he gently asked her not to trample the flowers, and even complained that the Wi-Fi wasn't fast enough for her to livestream. Yeah, that's the kind of person she was. But my grandparents weren't easily fooled. Behind the innocent little act she put on in front of my mom, they saw through her real nature, selfish, lazy, and outright disrespectful. One day, my grandma looked me in the eye and said, "She doesn't belong here. She's not here for you or us, just the swimming pool." I nodded and gave a bitter smile. Finally, someone got it. They never yelled at her or told her to leave. That wasn't their way. But they made it clear she wasn't welcome. My grandma would cook meals Martha didn't like. My grandpa gave her gardening chores just enough for her to reveal how entitled and lazy she really was. Eventually, she got bored and started skipping visits. But every time she did show up, she left behind a mess of emotions for me to clean up. Each time I got angrier, not just at Martha but at my mom. The woman who used to be my rock had now become the person throwing me into unfair situations. Why didn't she ever ask how I felt? Why was I always the one being told to grow up while Martha got a free pass? I was too young to rebel, so I endured. But deep down, I made myself a silent promise. One day, when I'm old enough, strong enough, I'll break free from this, and no one, not my mom, not my stepdad, will ever get to decide my life again. I used to think the worst days of my life were when my mom emotionally abandoned me, or when Martha humiliated me right in front of everyone and no one stepped in to defend me. But no, that was just the prelude to the real nightmare that hit me when I turned 17. That day, I had just finished my finals and was working a shift at the small grocery store near my house, mostly to avoid being around my stepfather. He was home alone while my mom and my grandparents had gone on a long vacation. It was supposed to be just another family trip, nothing special, but it turned out it would be their last. That afternoon, while I was restocking shelves, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Please contact us immediately. Your family members have been in a serious accident." My heart stopped. I froze. My hands shook as I called the number back. I can't remember how long that call lasted, only the voice on the other end. Calm, cold, professional. A doctor. "I'm sorry, your mother and grandparents didn't survive." My entire world collapsed. I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I called again, hoping they had the wrong person, that this was some cruel mistake. The only thing that kept playing in my head was the question, why them? My mom, even though we had grown distant, was still my mother. My grandparents, the only people who loved me unconditionally. I hadn't even apologized to Mom for our last argument. I never got the chance to thank my grandparents for all those amazing summers, for giving me the only sense of home I'd ever known. 2 days later, their bodies were brought home. I stood frozen in front of the caskets, staring, trying to convince myself this wasn't real. But the smell of white funeral flowers, the quiet sobs from relatives, the pity in everyone's eyes, they all confirmed it. This pain was real. No one was coming back. No miracle was going to happen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just froze. My whole body went numb like I was drowning in ice. And honestly, that kind of pain, the one that doesn't leave visible wounds but eats you alive from the inside, it's worse than any physical blow. After the funeral, I thought maybe I could grieve in peace. That maybe, eventually, the silence would help me heal. But then a man showed up holding a folder and delivered something I never saw coming, a will. He introduced himself as my grandparents' attorney. Apparently, I had been named in their estate plan. I was shocked. My mom had never once mentioned anything about them having wealth. I always thought they were just humble people living off retirement. My mom worked a regular job. To me, love was her greatest asset, but my grandparents, they had prepared for everything. According to the will, the inheritance was to be split 40% for my mom, 40% for me, and 20% to charity. But since my mom had passed away, her share would automatically transfer to me. That meant that at 17, I had suddenly become the sole heir to 80% of my grandparents' estate. We're talking about a serious amount of money. But there was a catch. Since I wasn't legally an adult yet, my entire inheritance had to be managed by a legal guardian, and now, by default, that guardian was my stepfather. It felt like a punch to the gut. The man I trusted the least, the man who always saw me as a burden, now had control over a multi-million-dollar estate that technically belonged to me. I hadn't even finished grieving my mom and grandparents, and already I was drowning in something else entirely: fear. How was I supposed to protect the one thing I had left, the legacy of my grandparents, the love they left behind, from being twisted, misused, or stolen? I didn't know the answer. But I knew one thing for sure. If he planned to pull anything shady, he'd chosen the wrong kid to mess with. After the funeral, after all the cold handshakes, the hollow "sorry for your loss" comments, and those pitying glances, I just wanted to be alone. I locked myself in my room for days. I didn't eat. Didn't speak. I just stared at an old photograph of me, my mom, and my grandparents, the only family I ever truly had now, reduced to still images trapped on paper. Then came the shock. My stepfather, the man who'd always treated me like an inconvenience, suddenly became the perfect grieving father figure. He brought me meals, knocked gently on my door, cleaned the house, even left vitamins by my nightstand. To anyone else, he looked like a man stepping up in the face of tragedy, but I knew better. I saw through it all. And right on cue, exactly 1 week later, the mask fell off. That evening, he knocked again, this time holding a folder and wearing his usual fake smile. "Hey, kiddo," he said softly. "The doctor says rest is important, but you should also start thinking about the inheritance." I froze. He kept going, his voice laced with forced calm. "You know I helped your grandparents manage their finances. Now that they're gone, and your mom too, it just makes sense for me to continue. These papers here will authorize me to manage it all, save you the trouble." I sat up, staring him down. "What exactly are these papers?" "Just standard documents," he shrugged. "They give me full authority to make financial decisions for you, investments, transactions, things like that." I didn't hesitate. "Number," his smile faltered. He switched tones quickly now, trying to sound like a wise, caring father. "Look, you're still young. You don't have the experience to handle this. Money can mess people up. I'm just looking out for you." I kept my eyes locked on his. "Or maybe, you just want full control over the estate." That's when the facade cracked completely. His face hardened, eyes sharp and cold. "Listen, you little brat," he snapped. "The world is brutal. A kid like you doesn't know what you're doing. You'll waste it." "I'm doing the right thing here." I stood up and slammed the documents onto the desk. "You're not my father. You have no right to my grandparents' estate. And if you think I'm dumb enough to sign anything without knowing exactly what it is, you've got the wrong idea." He clenched his jaw and tried one more manipulation. "Your mother trusted me. She'd be heartbroken to see you acting like this." I laughed, bitter and cold. "Number, she'd be heartbroken. She trusted the wrong man." Silence filled the room. He didn't say another word. He turned and walked out, but before he left, I saw the look in his eyes, cold, calculating, and full of rage. That's when I knew this wasn't over. This was only the beginning. The next morning, the entire atmosphere changed. No more fake concern, no more polite knocks. Instead, he gave me side eyes, muttered passive-aggressive remarks, and filled the house with tension so thick it felt like smoke. I knew this war was coming. I just didn't expect it to start so soon or hit this hard, but I didn't back down. Not then, not now, because at 17, I had already lost everything I loved. And if he thought I was going to lose the rest without a fight, he seriously underestimated me. 4-0. On a Monday morning, as I was getting dressed for my evening shift at the grocery store, my stepfather stood outside my bedroom door, blocking the way. He was holding a piece of paper in one hand, and the sound of his heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. "Starting today, you don't need to come back here anymore," he said. His voice was calm but cold, so cold it sent a chill down my spine. "I'm not obligated to feed an ungrateful little shit," I froze. "What did you just say?" "You heard me. I married your mom, raised you for years, and now she's gone. You won't hand over the inheritance? Fine. Pack your things. Get out of my house. You're no longer part of this family." I stood there, stunned. I always knew he was cruel, but I never thought he'd go as far as kicking out a kid who hadn't even turned 18 yet just because he couldn't get what he wanted. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just turned around, grabbed a few sets of clothes, a small amount of cash, my ID, and stuffed them into a backpack. Then I walked out the front door, a door I had once called home, without looking back. I had nowhere to go. My grandparents were gone, my mom was gone, and now my stepfather had made it clear that I was on my own. In that moment, there was only one person I knew I could trust. Jack, my best friend since elementary school. When I called him, his voice cracked with emotion. "Where are you? Come to my place now." Jack lived with his mom, and thankfully she was one of the kindest people I've ever met. She let me crash in their spare room without asking too many questions. I explained the situation briefly and told her I'd leave as soon as I turned 18 and gained legal control of my inheritance. To repay them, I handed Jack my old phone and laptop, basically the only valuable possessions I had left. "Take these," I said. "Consider it rent." He didn't even hesitate, he just nodded. That first night in the unfamiliar bed, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the mattress or the new surroundings, but because of the fear. The fear that this wasn't the end. What if he didn't stop? What if he tried to set me up, frame me, or worse, hurt me to clear the path to the money? The next morning, I went straight to my grandparents' lawyer, the one who had handled their will. I told him everything. He listened quietly, then nodded. "You did the right thing. Hold your ground. Once you turn 18, we'll legally transfer everything into your name." From that day on, I lived like a shadow. I avoided my stepfather at all costs, stayed out of conflict, and focused entirely on preparing for what I now called the real battle. I worked shifts, studied law, read up on estate rights and asset management, anything that could help me prepare for that one moment, my 18th birthday. During that time, my stepfather continued texting me, switching back and forth between threats and fake concern. Some days it was, "Do you need money? Come home, I'll take care of everything." Other days it was, "You won't hold onto that estate for long. I know where you are." I never replied. I saved every message, every voicemail because I knew this wasn't about family anymore. This was a legal war, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight it alone. On the day I turned 18, it rained. A quiet, steady kind of rain. Not heavy, but just cold enough to make me shiver as I stood outside the lawyer's office. He was the only adult in the past year who'd made me feel genuinely protected in a world full of manipulators and liars. He shook my hand firmly and gave me a warm smile. "Congratulations," he said. "As of today, you have full control of your inheritance." It was just one sentence, but my heart started pounding. Not because I was excited, but because I knew this was where it really began. After a few formalities, everything my grandparents had left behind, real estate, stocks, investments, was officially transferred into my name. I became the legal owner. No one could sign on my behalf anymore. No one could touch a single cent without my say-so. It was a moment of relief and overwhelming pressure all at once. A week later, I called my stepfather, who had been the temporary manager of the estate up until I came of age. His voice was as fake sweet as ever. "Congrats, son. You're a man now. I'm proud of how far you've come." I cut him off. "Starting today, I no longer need you managing the estate. My attorney has appointed a licensed professional to take over." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then he tried to recover. "But I've been taking care of everything from the beginning." "Exactly," I said, "and I've seen exactly how you've taken care of it. Your role is over. Step aside." I blocked his number right after that. No drama, no yelling, just a silent goodbye with all the power behind it. The new asset manager my lawyer recommended was an independent specialist, someone who'd handled large estates before. Within 2 weeks of digging through the financial records, all the documents my stepfather had once controlled the truth came out, and it was filthier than I'd imagined. "There are signs of embezzlement and money laundering," the new manager told me, placing a summary report in front of me. Several investments have unclear origins, there are suspicious transfers, and some transactions don't even exist in the official banking systems. I just sat there, stunned. He had taken advantage of everyone, my grandparents' trust, my mother's death, and my silence. He didn't just steal money, he stole from my family, from my legacy. But for the first time, I wasn't numb anymore. I was angry, furious. My hands shook not out of fear, but rage. And I knew then, I wasn't playing nice anymore. With my attorney's help, I filed a formal lawsuit against my stepfather. The charges? Breach of fiduciary duty and suspected money laundering. It didn't take long. Within a week of filing, the court issued an emergency order. His bank accounts were frozen, his devices seized, and he was restricted from leaving the city until the investigation was complete. That's when he cracked. He panicked, started spreading lies, trying to turn people against me. Whispered rumors that I was ungrateful, that I was suing the man who raised me like his own. But I didn't care. I had evidence. I had the truth. And this time, I had the law on my side. Fighting him was anything but easy. I barely slept those nights. I'd lie awake wondering if he'd retaliate, and sometimes I was sure he would. One morning, I found a crumpled, threatening note shoved under my windshield. Another time, I swore I was being followed. Still, I never backed down. Because this wasn't just about inheritance. This was about dignity, about my grandparents' legacy, my mother's memory, and the child I used to be, the one they tried to silence. I knew the fight was far from over. But this time, I wasn't scared. For once, I held the cards. When the investigation became public and the lawsuit gained traction, he retaliated just like I expected. He didn't face me like a man. Instead, he filed a countersuit, demanding my grandparents will be voided, claimed that he was the one abandoned, claimed that he was the rightful heir because he had managed everything from the beginning. Hearing that, I laughed. This was the same man who threw me out like trash the moment I refused to hand over the estate, the same man who manipulated, lied, and schemed, now pretending to be a loyal father. Please. My lawyer leaned in and said quietly, "Don't worry, the truth speaks louder than crocodile tears." Finally, the court date arrived. He walked in wearing a tailored suit, looking smug like he still had some kind of power. I wore a plain white shirt. My palms were sweaty, hands trembling just a bit, but it wasn't fear. It was the weight of survival, the knowledge that I was finally confronting the very person who tried to ruin me. The judge started by reviewing the financial records. That's when everything began to unravel. My new asset manager took the stand, calm, precise. He presented every shady transaction, large withdrawals into my stepfather's personal account, investments in clearly fake shell companies, and inheritance money being spent on luxury goods for him and his daughter. My stepfather turned pale. He stammered, tried to spin a narrative, said it was all system errors, that it was for my own good. But the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was rock solid. There were gaps in the accounting that couldn't be explained, money that had simply vanished. And then the judge leaned forward and asked, "How do you explain the missing $150,000 that can't be accounted for?" Silence. He had nothing. And in that silence, I knew. I had won. The next day, the court ruled. His petition to void the will? Denied. He was ordered to repay every dollar he stole. He was fined and forced to cover my legal fees. A no-contact order was placed on him during the fraud investigation. He lost everything. His house, his car, his bank accounts, all gone. But it didn't stop there. Threats continued. Anonymous notes, creepy messages, shadows outside my apartment. Nothing provable, but I knew who it was. Then one day, Martha showed up, his golden child. She screamed at me. "You ruined my family. You kicked my dad into the street over money?" I looked her straight in the eye and replied, "Remember when you laughed at me for getting kicked out of my home as a kid? Now you know what that feels like. Hurts, doesn't it?" She lunged at me, tried to slap me. I stepped back and pointed at my dog, who was already growling from the corner. He barked once, loud and sharp. She flinched and ran. And for a moment, I felt something strange. Pity? Maybe. But mostly, I felt peace. Justice had finally spoken. It's been 4 months since the court ruling, but I still dream about him sometimes. Not terrifying nightmares with monsters or chaos, but vivid flashbacks. Him standing in that courtroom, smirking like he still had control, Him staring me down with those cold, sharp eyes. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, drenched in sweat, until I reminded myself, I made it out. I survived that nightmare. After the trial ended, I left my grandparents' house. It used to be my safe place. But after everything that happened, the house felt too large, too hollow, too haunted by memories that once brought peace, but now only hurt. I moved into a small apartment. Simple, quiet, safe. Only my lawyer and a couple of close friends know where I live. With the inheritance fully restored, I could have taken a break. I could have coasted, lived in comfort for a while, but I didn't. I enrolled in law school. People asked me why. I just smiled. But deep down, I knew I never want to be that kid again. The one who didn't understand the contracts he was being told to sign. The one trapped in silence. The one who didn't know his rights. So I studied the law, learned the system. I wanted to become the person I once needed, someone who stands between others and the people trying to take advantage of them. I also enrolled in finance courses not to get rich, but to stay in control of what I have. This time, I'm the one holding the reins. I began cutting ties with the toxic people from my past. I filed a restraining order against my stepfather and Martha. It wasn't permanent, but it gave me the space I needed to breathe and start healing. Some days still hurt. I miss my mom, her cooking, her voice, her warmth. I miss my grandparents, their patience, their laughter. I even miss the version of me who believed love always held families together. But now I know, family isn't just blood. Family is who stays when everything falls apart, and when no one else stood by me, I stood by myself. My story isn't a fairy tale, but I found something better. I found me. And if you're in the dark right now, I promise, you can find your light too.